Hello again, students, and welcome to the homework. In the theory session for this nugget, I introduced some of the most basic thinking with the energy supply system. One reason to do that is that many people outside the energy sector do not fully realize the importance of a robust energy infrastructure for modern society. And this is also reflected in my phrasing. You will notice that I do not talk about a supply chain. I talk about a supply system. And that is because the energy system must be very robust. And for that, you cannot rely upon a supply chain. You cannot rely upon just-in-time deliveries. There will always be a multitude of primary suppliers, of transports, of intermediate storages, buffers, and of processes. And there is a multitude of customers and products. Some customers will desire cooling, some will desire heating. Some customers will desire liquid car fuel, some will desire electricity, and some would maybe desire something else. The system must deliver all this at an extremely high security. Following this nugget, you shall understand these things, and you shall be able to take the consequences of them into account when you do the regional biomass inventories and plans. This means that, like you have done before, you shall concentrate on your own region and further develop those inventories that you have done in previous nuggets. What you have not done before is to take reliability and robustness into account, so that is what you shall include now. The robustness demand will have to be taken into account throughout the whole planning project, and that is also a very important part of what you shall learn. Now, let me go back in time a bit. Over the decades, I've seen a lot of enthusiastic entrepreneurs setting off numerous bioenergy projects in regions all over the world, and I've seen them fail. In most cases, there is one very clear reason for the failure, and that is this. Just like in all other sectors, there are trends and fashions coming and going within engineering, and they tend to come back with a periodicity about 10-20 years. In the late 1970s, everybody wanted to gasify things. The same thing applied by the late 1990s, and it seems to be coming back again. Pyrolysis was very fashionable in the 1980s. Torrefaction, which is nothing but a pyrolysis process, was very popular by the early to mid-1990s. And today, biochar production, that is pyrolysis, is hot stuff. A safe way to make a project fail is to first select a technology to be used. If you do that, you can be almost sure that your project will fail. So you don't want to follow the trends. Instead, what you have to do is first to identify the end users and what they want. That will be your market. After that, you have to identify the local resources. Qualities and robust quantity estimates must be assessed. Finally, you will have to check if there is any process to connect the raw materials to the market. If there is not, or if the technology is not mature or very complicated, then take a step back and start over again. So, what you shall read before starting to do the homework is this. First, the decision support tool. This handbook, which is available from the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations, is available as a PDF file from the address shown in this slide. This handbook is biased towards planners at a national level. You might say that it's a bit policy-oriented. The reason I still include it in this masterclass is because as an energy engineer, you simply must realize that the energy supply system is one of the most important national infrastructures. The regional energy infrastructure is part of and depending of and communicating with the national structure. So you simply have to appreciate the national level. The how-to guide is much more down to earth. This can be used as a hands-on project handbook. Since it is not biomass specific, will there be no specific hints on how to assess the amounts of any specific crop. So if you need specific hints on the assessment of, say, non-woody biomass, and if you are not satisfied with the methods described in the BusyPlan handbook, then you will have to buy yourself a new book. And in that case, I would recommend the Biomass Assessment Handbook. The main author is Frank Rocio-Caillet, and you will find it on the web. But if you have taken the previous lessons, and if you have done all the homeworks, then I would say that the steps outlined in the how-to guide are fully sufficient and that you will have no difficulties in your assessments. And then there is another 10 pages to be read, and that is chapter 50 in the BusyPlan handbook. I've said before that economy, insofar as counting money, is a meaningless guess number game which is below the dignity of an academic course. So why do I recommend you read a text on bioenergy economy? The answer is that counting money is certainly meaningless, because the actual costs for your project will completely depend on when, where and how your specific project takes place. But you have to have a basic understanding of the general cost structure. And especially, as in section 505, you have to understand how bankers tend to judge these kind of projects. Because you will most probably have to contact financiers to get your project running. And then you have to understand how they see the risks of bioenergy projects. So read these 3 texts now. In previous nuggets, like in the first lesson, have you identified and classified your regional resources? I never told you how to go about when doing the quantification, but now I will do that. To do a proper quantification, you will have to find statistics extending at the very least 10 years back, preferably if you can find 20 years. And then you have to compute the average. So far, that is probably what you already did when you assessed the 8 different biomasses for the Septo certificate in lesson 1. But what you have to do to get a robust analysis and quantification is to analyze the statistics so as to find amounts that can be trusted at least 8 years out of 10. The simplest way is to just subtract one standard deviation from the average yield and use that value. But there may be other ways to do it in your region and considering your biomasses. And then, depending on how your neighbor regions look, you may or may not try to figure out if a cooperation between the regions would be a good thing. Maybe the neighboring region always has a high yield of something when your own region has a low yield of something else. Or not. Sit down and think about what a robust biomass-based energy system means in terms of annual crops and perennial crops in your own region, and adjust your assessments accordingly.